Okay. Now, the public financing, this is much more tricky, right? Because for public listing, you have a very high regulatory burden. For instance, I mean, the basic idea of securities regulation is that you want to ensure that market participants can base their decisions regarding investments, such as equities, bonds, and so on and so forth, on reliable and a well-defined set of information. Right? This is where accountants come in. This is where the brokers or the underwriters of an offering come in, because they have to do what's referred to as due diligence. So this is a very elaborate process which involves enormous legal fees and enormous amount of effort. So, but the whole idea here is that the general public, so an investor who has a basic understanding of financing, can put money into the business knowing that a sufficient amount of information has been provided in a reliable fashion. The assumption is that accredited investors are much more sophisticated, so they either can get the information that they want, or they have enough money to actually stand some losses and total losses that often occur for startup companies if they have to. Now, the new thing that comes somewhat in between the public and the private part and the accredited part is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is something which is an initiative where firms can raise funds on a particular platform, and they can raise this from practically anybody. Now, there are also restrictions in there. So, for instance, investors have an upper limit of what they can invest in all crowdfunded entities, and it is kind of on the issue to figure out how much the respective investor already has. This again is not a trivial process, it requires a lot of effort. But this is a new thing that had entered markets worldwide, and in particular, as you can see in a minute, this is very successful in countries such as China. So here in particular is, in the next few slides, I'm going to review just some nice pictures from Raghu Rao, who has written a paper where he collected data on crowdfunding all through the world. And so you can see the volume of, or the log dollar volume of crowdfunding per capita in US dollars. This is, I think, for the year 2015. You can see most of the crowdfunding has been raised in the US. Okay, so it's not surprising, so people are, quite comfortable with public markets there, but also in China, in New Zealand, in Australia, and also in the UK. Now, the UK is a very large public market, but as you can see, there's various different jurisdictions that have also been part of crowdfunding and that are sort of hot areas. Canada, not so much, but we have something on the order of 30 crowdfunding platforms too. All right, now just very briefly, I want to talk about the economics of crowdfunding. There's effectively two types of crowdfunding. Number one is just equity crowdfunding in the form of traditional securities. This could be actually loans, so it could be debt, peer-to-peer financing. This loosely also falls under crowdfunding. It could be equity, or some mixture of arrangements there. There's some innovative fortunes, and the tokens that we're referring to and we're talking about later actually fall into this too. Now, the second part is, which is also common, is a pre-sale of a product. Now, what happens, for instance, so a perfect example for that is, you have a new quadcopter or a loudspeaker or something which is a cool item that you don't want to raise external funding for, but you basically have a product, you show it to people, and you then, you sell it to people, or rather people make a commitment to buy it from you, you collect the money, and then you go into production. So, this is the traditional Kickstarter campaigns. I, for instance, bought an item on Kickstarter because I saw something on YouTube. It was something that's a device that I use for barbecuing. It looked like a cool thing. I went to Kickstarter, made my contribution, and half a year later, the product was shipped to me because, the entrepreneur first had to collect the money, then find somebody to build it for him, and then had to be shipped all over the world. But there we are. It's actually, this is actually something which can help, in particular, the small entrepreneurs with a single product idea to get their product out in the market and to get it sold. All right. Now, if you look at the different types of crowdfunding throughout the world, now, generally speaking, in terms of just the platforms, China is, of course, is the most dominant place. They have, and this is for 2015, they had over 350 platforms, more than any other market. Most of the platforms had some form of debt financing, so this is really peer-to-peer lending, but they also had equity financing platforms and so on and so forth. So there's a large variety, and this is the one thing that you take from here, is there's a large variety of different models that exist, And these platforms exist in various jurisdictions throughout the world. Now, if we look at crowdfunding in Canada, we also have a total of 97 different platforms. At least this is from 2017. Some of these platforms have now disappeared. But there was a certain push and a certain development in these crowdfunding platforms. Now, as exciting as that looks like, many of these crowdfunding platforms were of the social type, right? So basically, you have a law case, or you need the support for some item, or for some medical procedure, or you have hit hard times, so people have a crowdfunding campaign just to help you, get through these hard times. People basically give you money because they think that you're worthy of it. But there are actually a fair number of crowdfunding platforms that are also in operation. As you can see, most of them are in Ontario, which is not surprising because it's also the biggest country province by population. Now, in terms of types, we have about 16 crowd equity portals. Many of them are focusing on real estate deals because this seems to be something that you can straightforwardly do. Some, for instance, called Nexus Crowd, Crowd Matrix. Then you have lending portals, and you can see here, if you ever are interested in fintech, these are peer-to-peer lenders, fall under this category loosely. And then there's about 45 different others. That is based on the data that I looked at from 2017. Again, it will have changed now, but the point is, there's a very large variety of different platforms.